Well, this is what happens when you try to do too many things at one time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then we will get started in just a moment. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put that back up anyway. And we'll get started. Can everyone see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to drive and talk at the same time and admit people and look at the chat. And anyway, good morning. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today. I'm Stephanie Dressler, the North Georgia Conference President of United Women in Faith. And I just want to extend a special welcome to our South Georgia Conference sisters and to any clergy that might be joining us this morning. I hope you all are looking forward to learning a bit about our Charter for Racial Justice and delving into the book, So You Want to Talk About Race. Initially, we had Reverend Dr. Bernice Kirkland leading this review, but due to a conflict, she contacted Reverend Dr. Tanya Miles, who agreed to pick up the ball and walk us through the book. We are so grateful and thankful to have her here this morning. So with that, let's start with a word of prayer led by Chung-Hee Lee, our Korean language coordinator.
Have mercy on me, O Lord. I have blinded my eyes in spite of the clear evidence of deeply embedded racism all around me. I have looked the other way. Too many have died. Too many have suffered. Too many have been locked out and cast aside. Too many indignities. Too many injustices. All still I look the other way. Have mercy on me, O Lord. I have hardened my heart. I could not allow myself to admit that my life was shaped as much by racism as theirs, mine to benefit and theirs to harm. But it was and it is and it will continue to be. I have cared too little. I have grieved too little. Have mercy on me, O Lord. I have silenced my tongue. My voice has not been raised in prophetic rebuke and anger. My feet have not stepped out for justice alongside those who have more courage than I. And in my silence, I am an accomplice to bigotry. Forgive me, O Lord. I have sinned against you, against those who suffer the evil of racism. Indifference has smothered my soul and snuffed out fleeting impulses for reconciliation. I ask for your forgiveness, and I will appropriately seek their forgiveness. I need your strength to step beyond blindness, indifference, and fear, to step toward those whom I have sinned against. Empower me, O Lord. Amen. 오 주여 저에게 자비를 베푸소서. 저는 눈이 멀었습니다. 제 주위에 깊게 내재된 인종주의의 명백한 증거에도 불구하고 저는 외면했습니다. 너무 많은 사람들이 죽었습니다. 너무 많은 사람들이 고통을 겪었습니다. 너무 많은 사람들이 속박당하고 버림받았습니다. 무관심, 불의가 너무 많습니다. 그리고 저는 여전히 외면했습니다. 오 주여, 나에게 자비를 베푸소서. 저는 제 마음이 굳었습니다. 제 인생이 인종차별주의에 의해 그들의 이익, 즉 혜택을 누리는 만큼 또한 해를 입는다는 것을 인정할 수 없었습니다. 그러나 지금도 계속될 것입니다. 저는 그저 조금 도왔습니다. 저는 그저 조금 슬펐습니다. 오 주여, 나에게 자비를 베푸소서. 저는 혀를 침묵시켰습니다. 이언적인 책망과 분노에 대해서 내 목소리는 들리지 않았습니다. 저의 발은 저보다 용기가 있는 사람들과 함께 정의를 위해 나아가지 않았습니다. 그리고 침묵 속에서 저는 편협한 공범자입니다. 오 주여, 저를 용서하여 주옵소서. 저는 주님과 인종차별의 악을 겪는 사람들에게 죄를 지었습니다. 무관심이 저의 영혼을 질식시켰고 화해의 충동을 막아버렸습니다. 저는 주님의 용서를 구하고 그들의 용서를 구할 것입니다. 주님, 제가 눈먼 것, 무관심, 두려움을 극복할 수 있도록 주님의 힘을 주시옵소서. 오 주님, 저에게 힘을 주시옵소서. 아멘.
Amen. Thank you. So on the current slide, you should be seeing our agenda for this morning. I'll give you a minute to take a look at that.
Slide's not showing, Stephanie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you see that?
No, not yet.
Okay. For some reason, my slides are not showing. I'm not sure that I'm sharing is the problem.
Probably it.
Let's see if I can share my screen. I apologize, ladies.
There.
I do believe we have an agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So this makes up the majority of our racial justice team. We are missing Deborah Constable, who is our MNO coordinator, and she had a conflict this morning, so she will not be with us. But I do want to take just a minute to thank the team. We've had several discussions and planning sessions for this morning, and I appreciate each and every one of you. I wanted to let you know that. So this current slide is our agenda for the session to give you a better idea of how the morning will flow. And as we begin to discuss and explore the topic of race, we would like to keep in mind our Sisterhood of Grace Covenant. If I can find it. Here we go. So as a community of women organized for mission, it is important that we be creative, so we be a creative, supportive fellowship espoused in the United Women of Faith purpose. In that spirit, these guidelines, often referred to as ground rules, provide a framework to ensure open, respectful dialogue and maximum participation to share, pray, learn, and listen together. Be mindful of our interrelatedness with one another and all of God's creation. Celebrate diversity and practice sustainability. Listen actively with head and heart. Speak from your own experience. Participate to the level of your comfort. Be aware of body language. Respect confidentiality. And expect unfinished business, both discomfort and joy. Ladies, please take yourselves off of mute if you're speaking.
Good idea. Thank you. Because we believe that God is the creator of all people and all are God's children in one family.
Because we believe that racism is a rejection of the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Because we believe that racism denies the redemption and reconciliation of Jesus Christ.
Because
We believe that racism robs all human beings of their wholeness and is used as a justification for social, economic, environmental, and political exploitation.
Because we believe that we must declare before God and before one another that we have sinned against our sisters and brothers of other races in thought, in word, and in deed.
Because we believe that in our common humanity in creation, all women and men are made in God's image, and all persons are equally valuable in the sight of God.
Because we believe that that our strength lies in our racial and cultural diversity, and that we must work toward a world in which each person's value is respected and nurtured.
Because we believe that our struggle for justice must be based on new attitudes, new understandings, and new relationships, and must be reflected in the laws, policies, structures, and practices of both church and state.
We commit ourselves as individuals and as a community to follow Jesus Christ in word and in deed, and to struggle for the rights and the self-determination of every person and group of persons. And may it be so.
Amen. Before Jessica, you introduced Reverend Dr. Tanya Miles, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the Charter for Racial Justice. It's something that has been a part of United Women in Faith since 1952, but it is something that we rarely discuss. And we felt as a conference and jurisdiction that it was time that we revisit it and remind all of us that it is a vital piece of our history and part of who we are. So the United Women in Faith first adopted the Charter of Racial Policies in 1952. We worked on ratification at multiple levels of the organization and readopted an updated version in 1962. Throughout the years, we lobbied the United Methodist Church to officially adopt the Charter, seeking to bring its commitments to the full body of the church. The Charter was first received by the General Conference in 1964 and first included in the Book of Resolutions in 1980. Since then, it has been updated and readopted regularly by delegates to General Conference. From the 1950s to the present, the Charter has been a core part of our identity.
Amen. Reverend Dr. Tanya Lawrence Miles is smart, talented. She's a preacher, an advocate. She's a leader, a teacher, a role model, and an excellent writer. Some of you may remember that she wrote the very meaningful litany for our 50th anniversary meeting last year. Dr. Miles graduated North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University with a BS in marketing. She received a Master of Arts in Youth Development and a Master of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary. She earned her Doctor of Educational Ministries from Columbia Theological Seminary. Tanya is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She is an elder in full connection of the North Georgia United Methodist Church, and she is chaplain and director of religious life at one of our national mission institutions, Clark Atlanta University. She is quoted as saying, "Clark Atlanta University is an exceptional institution of higher education, equipping leaders to think globally, encouraging leaders to reach deeply, and empowering leaders to change the world. Sharing in the development of these young people is a blessing," end quote. Before she comes, we ask if you have questions that you use the reactions icon to raise your hand or put your questions and comments in chat. We will try to get to as many questions as time allows. And if you're not talking, please remain on mute to avoid distractions and interruptions. And without further delay, please extend a warm welcome to my friend, Reverend Dr. Tanya Lawrence Miles.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Jessica, for that gracious introduction. It actually touched me deeply. And yes, you are my friend. Thank you to Stephanie and to all of you who have invited me to be a part of this conversation today. I am Reverend and I am Doctor. However, today I am Tanya. And so as we move through this next hour and a half, however much time we have together, I invite you to engage with me, ask questions. I do not know all of the answers, but together I do know that we can move forward. The prayer was beautiful. I see that someone has already asked for a copy of it. I ditto that. And I love that we heard it both in your native language as well as in English. How beautiful and how gracious a way to lead us into this conversation. I also heard about our covenant of grace and am reminded that in everything that we do as Methodists, grace undergirds us. And so right now, as we begin, I'm going to pull up my screen so that I can share. And while I do that, I'll just share a few things about Clark Atlanta University, where I am so blessed and privileged to serve. You see, make sure I can share the screen. Slideshow from the beginning. Clark Atlanta University has a little over 4,000 students. In the past few years, we've noticed that the majority of our students are coming to Clark Atlanta without a faith tradition at all, which means that there is tons of opportunity for us to engage these young people in service and in faith formation and in our local congregations. And it is my prayer that as we move forward, that we begin to move closer and invite you all onto campus to share with these young people who are powerful and amazing, who want to change the world and are so, if I may say, hell-bent on community service and being involved and engaged. One of the many things that I love to do on campus is to teach. I lead worship and Bible study and all of these other things, but to engage with students in conversation with their brilliance and their ideas and just the way they think about theory in relationship to their lives is just an absolute blessing. And so in every class, I always set the tone with kind of an agenda of what we go through. And today, as we are brilliant, amazing women, I'm doing the same thing. You'll see that for our time together, we'll start with just this thought that race is everywhere, but are we getting anywhere as a question? We're going to spend some time with a few icebreaker questions just to discover who's in the room. We will not come off mute, but I will ask you to respond to the questions in the chat. There's a little bit of information that I'd like to share about our author, who is also amazing. Although there are a lot of chapters, I've chosen several that I thought were most meaningful, 1 through 6, 8 through 10, 12 through 14, and 16. However, if there is something that we have not talked about, something that you are interested in sharing in this conversation, probing, exploring, discussing, please jump right in. A few things to note. I love volunteers as readers, and there will be several things that I will ask for volunteers so that we hear your voice inside of this space. Ask questions, discuss freely, speak up, be flexible, and above all else, trust this space, especially after the covenant that we shared in just a little bit earlier. Wanted to start with some of the things that are in the media just, I don't know, in the past 48 hours with regard to race. It was amazing for me to wake up to hear about Dolly Parton's sister's quote. Quotes. I included one that's down here in Black that you'll see here. And she says, when's the last time Black people have included or stood up for the indigenous Native Americans in this country? It's all a me mentality in America. White people aren't evil, and I resent that accusation from my perspective. Many of us believe in equality for all. And there were several other quotes that she shared. And in response to a lot of those quotes, if you're familiar with social media, if you were out there, you'll see that she got a lot of feedback and caught a lot of flack for all of the things that she said. Ron DeSantis, who will probably be speaking in Iowa soon, has been quoted and was again quoted as saying, Florida is where woke goes to die. And we know that there he has pushed back on critical race theory and the advanced placement African-American history course and a lot of other things as well. But how do you define woke? So I chose this definition: actively aware of systemic injustice and prejudices, especially those related to civil and human rights. But what does the Bible say about it? And you'll see down here in the right-hand corner, awake, awake, clothe yourself with strength. Shake off your dust, rise up, free yourself from the chains on your neck, daughter of Zion, as stated in Isaiah 52, verses 1 and 2. But also this week, we saw the release of Colin Kaepernick's book and some of the things that he shared about his upbringing with his adoptive family, and how even his mother, when he wanted to get cornrows, called him a thug, and in other ways mentioned other things that helped to shape him into who he is today. And so race is something, again, that is everywhere. I'm proud of you all in this group because you are willing to have the conversations. Since 1952, it has been a part of our organization. And to spend the time to actually think about and to brave the discourse is exceptional, because Methodist women have led for centuries. And I believe that we are in a time where we need individuals, we need groups, we need people who are so convicted in what it is that they believe, that they take a stand and a standard that we can follow so that we can all move forward. Not a stand or a standard one against the other, but a united stand so that people can see and identify, even within the groups that take a stand themselves, so that they can also join in. Every now and again, I'm going to look into the chat just to see if there's anything that you all want to share. But just a few things that were in the media in just the past 48 hours. And so as we begin this time together, I want to ask a couple questions. And as we ask, I think there are 6 different icebreaker questions. Place your answer in the chat and we'll begin to see. your responses and to see how we are moving forward together. First one, okay, thank you. On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your current energy level? On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your current energy level? 10, 5, 10, 9, 5, 6, 8, 9. Okay, 5, pretty high. I love it. I love it. Yep, I see it too. I can relate to that. 6, 8, beautiful, beautiful. 7, 5. So some of you on the higher level, I am hoping that you all will be the ones who will volunteer to read and to share. Yep, more 8s along the way. Awesome. Thank you for that. So our energy level is pretty good right now. Pretty good as we start this conversation. Next question, especially for those of you who have high energy, how many cups of coffee have you had so far today? How many cups of coffee have you had so far today? For me, it's been 1, 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, a half a cup, 0. Wow, half a cup, 0, 0. There was a time when I did not drink coffee, and I was at a UMW, formerly known as UMW event, and one of the rooms was so cold that the only thing that they had to drink that was warm was coffee. And so I got a cup of coffee and I didn't like the taste and I just filled it with sugar. And I got this jolt that was so amazing that I started drinking coffee after that event. 0 coffee, but I've had Coca-Cola. Good for you. You don't drink coffee. And so today I can't get my day started without some coffee. Awesome. Okay, next question. Are you an introvert, an extrovert, or an ambivert? Are you an introvert, extrovert, or ambivert? Are you a combination of the two? Introvert, extrovert, or ambivert? Ambivert, yeah, me too. When I'm tired and I've just given all of myself, I'm very much an introvert. When I'm truly rested, I can be so very extroverted. Introvert, extrovert, ambivert. Yeah. Good. We need all. Introverts are normally more reflective. Extroverts are certainly the ones who can get all things done, and ambiverts can switch, can be all 3. There you go. Thank you for that. If you all would mute your microphones unless you have something to say. Next question. I'll just mute her. There you go. Pick a superpower. Which one would you like? Would it be flight? Would it be invisibility, super strength, healing, or telepathy? Flight, invisibility, super strength, healing, or telepathy? Let's see what we got so far. Healing. Wow, a lot of healing. Beautiful. Telepathy, healing, invisibility, healing. Healing. Yeah, that's beautiful. Certainly what our world needs, and so many of us who are trying to find our way. We need healing in so many different ways. This is good. This is really good. Awesome. All right, let's see. I think there are 2 more. Oh, wait, one more. Some more in the chat. Healing and telepathy. It's interesting that the answers are all healing or telepathy, but the majority are healing. I think that's very telling, especially for this group. And so I will keep that in mind as we move forward with this conversation. Speaking of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you having conversations about race? 1, not at all. 5, somewhat comfortable. 10, very comfortable. On a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you having conversations about race? Okay, I see some 10s. Great. Beautiful. 8s, 10s. Yep. Beautiful, beautiful. And I know that you all have had conversations and have engaged in different ways with one another. And so I think this is beautiful. 5, 10, absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you, thank you. Except with people who disagree. Yep. Those with whom I should be talking. Yep. That's a great comment, Meg. I agree with that. And, you know, the author of this book offers some great tips and suggestions and approaches to those conversations. So we'll dig into some of that while we're here. 10, beautiful. We got a lot of 10s. Great. One more question. I think this is the last one. Please offer one word to describe your thoughts on the reading of this book. So you want to talk about race. One word that describes your experience, your thoughts. Challenged, awesome. I want my toes to be stepped on. Engaging, readable, absolutely readable. The way she writes with all of her stories, enlightening, sad. Wow, wow, beautiful. Challenged, yep. You know, there were so many things that there were some things that even caused me to think as well. Engaging, very understanding, yep. Eye-opening, cool, wow, okay. So a lot of enlightening, a lot of eye-opening, challenging, beautiful. So, you know, from these questions, in a lot of ways, we are on the same page with the superpower. The majority identified healing. Energy levels today, pretty high. Willingness and comfort level with having conversations about race, also pretty high. That's okay, Georgia. We're glad you're here, and we hope that this conversation is meaningful. And hopefully there's enough quotes within this presentation that you will be able to follow along and engage as well. I tried to pull out as much as possible. Boundaries, yeah. Thank you, Sherry. Great. Let's see here. Very cool. So I think in a lot of ways, we are on the same page. And as we are sisters in the faith in this space, there may be times when we want to come off mute and have conversations about some of the topics, some of the chapters, and I certainly encourage you to do that. This is not a one-way conversation, but it's intended for dialogue. And so I do look forward to engaging with you all. But first, a little bit about our author, who's absolutely amazing. Ijeoma Oluo is a writer, a speaker, and this is the part I love the best, an internet yeller. I love that she describes herself that way. You'll see some other stuff. She's the author of this book, as well as a book called Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America. She has been acknowledged by all kinds of publications, The Guardian, New York Times, Washington Post. She's been named to the 2021 Time 100 Next list. She's received award after award after award, and she lives in Seattle. I'd like to now play a video of a conversation that she is having with Trevor Noah. She gives a little bit of insight into the book, her writing, kind of the history behind it, and how she has become who she is. And so before we delve into the different chapters, I am going to share a video. It's about 7 minutes, and we will go from there. Let's see, there's a quote, there's a comment. I am shocked that there are only 65 participants. We have much work to do right here. Wow. You know what, Nancy, I appreciate that. And I think that's a great observation. You know, a lot of people shirk this conversation because it's so difficult to have. A lot of people will pull back, step back, close their ears, not want to be engaged because, yeah, agreement. Thank you for that. You know, as some of you said, this is enlightening, or the book was enlightening or challenging. A lot of people are not yet in a space where they're ready to be enlightened or challenged or moved out of their comfort zone at all. I think it's conflicts. Okay, yep, that too, absolutely. We are so busy in a lot of different places and doing a lot of different things. And so there are conflicts that do present themselves as well. Let me pull up this video and we will go from there. If someone would give me a thumbs up so that I know that you all can hear it once it starts to play. Let's see, share sound. We had over 90 registered. Yep, okay. And so then what do we do with the interest, Jessica, as we move forward? Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Let me take this part off. Let me make this large. And I'm going to mute myself right now. Thank you. Let's see. Powerful yep. Powerful conversation. Yep. Just put the book on my wish list. I love that she wrote out of determination. Intriguing. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was so moved by her and her story, not only in the video, but also the way that she started Love Her Confidence. Absolutely. She's such a positive person, helps people hear her about the pyramid scheme. Yep. I spend a lot of time in the foreword, the introduction of the book, and really I like to spend a lot of time just kind of engaging in, you know, the position of the author and where they are situating self. And, you know, for her, as she talks about her journey from her childhood through young adulthood into where she is now, you know, she says she's always known race. Even as a young Black female growing up in Seattle, even around friends who were not friends of color. And that, you know, for the longest time, she would hear certain things, but not necessarily feel prompted to speak up and to speak out. Even when she started her career, there were times when she would hear things, but not feel compelled to speak up and speak out. She says, until she could no longer be silent. And, you know, I think for all of us, regardless of our point of view, we have to get to that point where we can no longer feel like we can be silent about what's going on. For people of color, for women of color, we often get to that point quicker than others. But that is the thing that really moves us forward. And now she has grabbed the mic. And to someone's comment in the chat, she is speaking so that other people can hear her. She is awesome. Absolutely. And so as we dig into the book, I can just get this. There we go. These are all of the chapters. And I love that she raised the title of each chapter as a question, which shows, you know, openness and willingness for dialogue. Is it really about race? What is racism? What if I talk about race wrong? Why am I always being told to check my privilege? What is intersectionality and why do I need it? Is police brutality really about race? How can I talk about affirmative action? What is the school to prison pipeline? And I know you all have done a lot of faithful work there. Other chapter titles. Why can't I say the N-word? What is cultural appropriation? Why can't I touch your hair? What are microaggressions? Why are our students so angry? What is the model minority myth? But what if I hate Al Sharpton? I just got called racist. What do I do now? Talking is great, but what else can I do? As she said, it's time to move to action. And so I'd like for us to begin to read together, starting with the first pages of the book. And I've intentionally pulled out a lot so that we can level set ourselves with our kind of our understanding of racism in America, the definitions for racism, and then we'll move forward from there. I'm going to invite individuals to come off mute and to take a turn to read. You can read a paragraph or a few sentences, you can read the whole thing, but I'd love to hear our voices in this shared space together. So is there someone who will come off mute and get us started? Or should I call? Oh, there you go.
This is Georgia, I will.
Yes.
All right. The rise of voices of color, the widespread dissemination of video proof of brutality and injustice against people of color has brought the urgency of racism in America to the forefront of our collective consciousness. Race is not something that people can choose to ignore anymore. Some of us have been speaking all along and have not been heard. Others are trying out their voices for the first time.
Thank you, Georgia.
These are very stressful times for people of color who have been fighting and yelling and trying to protect themselves from a world that doesn't care, to suddenly be asked by those who ignored the for so long, what has been happening your entire life? Can you educate me? Now that we are all in the room, how do we start the discussion?
Thank you.
This is not just a gap in experience and viewpoint. The Grand Canyon is a gap. This is a chasm that could drop an entire solar system into. No matter how daunting you are, you are here because you want to hear and you want to be heard. You are here because you know that something is very wrong and you want a change. We can find our way to each other. We can find our way to our truths. I can see it happen. My life is a testament to it. And it all starts with conversation. There is a chance that you, regardless of race, have tried to have these conversations in the past.
Thank you.
There is also a good chance that they have not gone well. So not well that perhaps you have been afraid to ever have these conversations again. If that is you, you're not alone. These conversations will not be easy, but they will get easier over time. We have to commit to the process if we want to address and change race, racism, and radical oppression in our society.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. Thank you. You know, when I think about some of the comments that were in the chat earlier, I recall someone who said, I want my toes to be stepped on. These conversations are difficult. They're not easy conversations. But I love that she starts from a point of acknowledgement that, you know what, we're here. And because we're here, thank goodness, because that means that there is a willingness to engage in dialogue. Regardless of the end you're on, some who have never been heard, some who are trying to have the conversations, others who are really trying to find a way to enter and engage in the conversation. Absolutely. Yep. I can relate to that author, what the author is saying. The latter part of my career was in a white male dominate. Yeah. Is there anyone who would like, I see some of the things in the chat. Is there anyone who'd like to share something openly? Before I was in corporate America, before I was in ministry, I was in corporate America. And one of my first jobs was actually in Boston at TJ Maxx in their executive training program. And what they were trying to do in Framingham, Massachusetts was increase the number of people of color who were in the corporate office. And so they recruited heavily from different places. I was actually at FIT, the Fashion Institute. But in my training class were a few students from Howard, a few students from FAMU, and a few other places. And this was in the early 90s. And it became quite difficult sometimes to engage in conversation because not everyone was even willing to have dialogue. I can recall one time we were, and Stephanie, I saw your comment, we were in a group session and trying to figure out how to, increase the number of people of color in the corporate office. And I remember one person saying, well, we can't have more people of color we don't have more people of color in the office because we don't offer public transportation, out to our corporate office. And her comment, in that moment caused a big uproar in the room, because even in the midst of what she was saying, even though she did not intend harm, and what she was saying was actually insinuating that the only transportation that people of color have is the reliance on public transportation. And so, in corporate America, in all environments, we come together from so many different backgrounds, and we have to find a way to make it work. And in a lot of cases, that doesn't necessarily happen. Before, you've probably seen parts of this graph before, but I wanted to include the entire thing because it shows our reality. It shows thoughts on equality. It shows thoughts on equity, and then what justice looks like. And so from our reality on the far left side, you'll see that there are those individuals who stand much taller and have a greater advantage than others, some who are actually in a hole as they're trying to see over to engage. But equality would look like everyone getting the same thing. Still not ideal, because as everyone gets the same increment, there are still those individuals who still cannot see over or have access to. But equity looks like, okay, taking each individual, where are you? And then recognizing that some people need more to get to the same level than others. But what justice really looks like is something completely different. There are no stair steps. There is no wall. There is no barrier. Everyone is able to have access at their level so that everyone is equally there. Any thoughts or comments on this? Okay. All right, let's keep reading. Another volunteer, please.
Race, as we know it in the U.S., is closely integrated with our economic system. The system of racism functioned primarily as a justification for the barbaric act of chattel slavery and genocide of my brain slow.
Indigenous
peoples. You cannot put chains around the necks of the women. You cannot put chains around the necks of other human beings or slaughter them wholesale, while maintaining social rules that prohibit such treatment without first designating those people as somewhat less than human.
Thank you. Thank you. A little bit more to read.
Later, the function of racism was somewhat repurposed as a way of dividing lower classes, still with the ultimate goal of the economic and political supremacy of white elites. Yes, like many say, race is a social construct. It has no bearing on science.
And you will often hear someone say, we are one race, the human race. Race is a social construct. And she also goes on to say that money is a social construct as well. But very interesting to me that she starts with the justification for racism being the treatment of people of color who were enslaved so that they could benefit and profit from their enslavement and their work. But then she goes on to say, well, okay, after slavery was over, racism continued. It just kind of morphed into a very different view, and that was classism as well, still with the same intent in mind, to give benefit and power to one versus the other. She also talks about money as a social construct. Would someone read this as well?
Money is also a social construct, a series of rules and agreements we all made up while pretending that these pieces of paper are worth our entire lives. But we cannot simply stop thinking about money and will cease to enthrall us. It has woven its way into every part of our lives. It has shaped our past and futures. It has become alive. Race has also become alive.
Thank you, thank you. So the two things that really empower our society, our culture, are race and money. Two things that are not of God, two things that we have constructed, but two things that are intricately woven into who we are, how we think, what we believe, and what we do. How do we change those things? Any thoughts? Can we change those things? Money matters, and to us, race matters. How can we change that? Do you believe that these things can truly change? And if so, how?
Tanya, as United Women in Faith, we have had opportunities to work for equal pay. We've had opportunities to raise the minimum wage. And although it's still not at a level, I think, that's equal across America, there are things that we've been asked to do and things that we can do. We can appeal sometimes to legislation that will make things better. I think just being aware of and then taking action on those things where we can, is very important.
Thank you, Jessica, beautifully said. And you think about those things, and to your point, you may have moved the needle some, but not to the extent that everything has changed. But these two things are at the root of everything in our society, our culture, and our experiences. In some ways, some people would even argue in our faith. How's that grab you?
Tanya, one of the things I was thinking about as you were asking about this in terms of how can we change it, and I was thinking in terms of, as people of faith, we've got to go back and look at the faith part. And what I mean by that is that we profess to believe in Jesus Christ. We profess to believe in everything that is written in the Bible, but that's just a belief. Do we really believe? Because if we truly believe the things that are in the Bible, then this money and race would not have so much of a place in our lives and in our hearts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're right on point with that, Georgia, which is why I chose this this image, love on one side and money on the other. Which one really outweighs, and which one really has a hold on who we are and how we do what we do? I think it's something that we do have to think about. And if we do go back to our faith as belief in action, then what are the things that we individually need to change in order to come to terms with this? I see something in the comment. Any other comments?
I was thinking that to me, race and money begins when you're a child. I'm thinking that if the parents or guardians or the community would have a better understanding of how money and race impacts their community or even in their family, I think that a better understanding of the use of money and how race affects the use of money will be important for the young child or for the student to be able to manipulate in their own environment with money and race. I'm saying more talk and more education, because I find that many of the problems that we face sometimes stems from family, stems from community, people that we interact with. So if we can't converse with these individuals, we find it difficult to converse with people who are outside of that framework, so to speak. So I think more needs to be placed in the home and in the community to help get this message out, so that it can be a part of their everyday life, their everyday thinking.
You know, I think that's beautiful, Hattie. And, you know, as you were, I love the way you say the use of money, right? Because that, we think about the use of money, the repair of the streets in the community that you live in, the classroom, the teachers, their pay, the books. Do you get new books every year, or do you have the same books that were there 20 years ago? The use of money impacts so many things in our community. You know, I wonder how many of our Bible studies, our curriculum that we use in our Sunday school classes, Hattie, to your point, with our young people, would engage race. How do we have curriculum that engages race as a social construct, money as a social construct? And if we had such a curriculum and we taught it, would the parents of these children be happy about such, or would they push back against it? I think you're onto something there. It does start when we're younger, because we have to help to frame the way that our young people are thinking, so that as they grow up, they are more aware of how money works, how race works, and how to overcome both as they are aiming to be who God created them to be. Brilliantly said. Let's see, I saw two. We forget that money is we do forget that it is a construct, right? Before there was money, we bartered. We gave to one another. It was just, do you have eggs, right? Before, it was just a transference. I was the egg person, Jessica was the milk person. There was somebody who had the straw and the whatever to build the house, and we all made it work. And we've moved away from all of those things. Not that we're going back to that, but how then, as Hattie said, does money become a tool towards justice, as opposed to something that we're just all striving after that has a hold on us? There is no we or they, only us in justice. Love it. Love it.
I was thinking about what you just said about the bartering system. I remember when I was growing up, we were in a very small community, poor community, but small, where everybody was on the same level. We had this, everybody was poor. It would have been great if everybody had money, because we could have done better, but we supported one another.
Yeah.
You know, and you're absolutely right. If somebody needed a cup of flour, then I've got the flour. And so they just asked and we took it to them.
Yeah.
So there was no, I'm better than you, or, you know, I'm more superior. We were all equal. We were all just sisters and brothers, making it and taking care of one another.
Yeah.
And that's sadly what, you know, we're lacking today.
And how often do you hear someone say, Jessica, to your point, you know, I didn't know that we were living any differently than anybody else until I stepped outside of my community, right? Because you had everything you needed and you were happy and you were joy filled.
Yes, I had no idea we were poor, because we were all in it together and we shared, and nobody said, you know, ha, 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 look at you, you don't have anything. Look at me, I have more.
Right.
There was no comparison. It wasn't put out there for me to see.
That's right.
And, you know, for others to revel in.
Yeah. Let's see, Jane said define poor. It's a relative term, right, Jane? And how you define that term. Let's see, many people I interact with do not understand that race is a social construct. Have you ever had a conversation, Beverly, with someone about race that engages them in the fact that race is a social construct?
I have tried, and there are some folks who just don't listen. They rely on something that their parents told them or their teachers told them years ago, and they're not open to the realities of.
Wow. So thank you for sharing that, Beverly. Here's a question for the group, right? Because until individuals are at a point where they're willing to be open to a conversation, have a conversation, or accept change, how do you engage them in conversation? What are some things that maybe could be shared along the way that could open somebody up to that type of conversation? Anybody have any suggestions?
I think it's one thing is that to a degree we all are fearful. Fearful of, not fearful of the subject, but fearful of the reaction that we're going to have from having this conversation. So somehow, if we can feel as if we can make someone comfortable, if we can act as if we're comfortable, and if we can help the other person that you're sharing with feel that from you, or be able to sense that you really care what they think, and that's important to you and to the conversation, I think that will make a difference. Because I don't care what we say. There are times when I've been in a situation where I was prepared, but I was afraid.
Sure.
Not afraid of the people, but afraid of what it was going to do.
Yeah.
What reaction it was going to cause based on what I was saying.
Thank you for that. And so acknowledging that fear and starting from a place of trust and love and engagement. Yeah, it's probably a good starting point. Mary, I see your hand. Let's see. Tina says, point out similarities we have to help make them more comfortable. Same thing. So trying to create a situation that is comfortable. Mary?
Yes, thank you. I remember an incident that happened when I was working in the corporate world as well. We were doing interviews for a position, and haven't been in human resources, but when we finished with the applicant interviews, there was one that the person that was interviewing with me, who happened to be a white guy, said that he did not like this candidate because this candidate just didn't seem what he thought it should be. He said, for instance, when I asked, he said, he never made eye contact with me, you know. And so I had to make a very bold move at that time, being that this guy was my superior as well. I had to make a very bold move and give him an education on why in the past it was considered disrespectful and downright dangerous for an African American to look into the eyes of a white man. And that was just very eye-opening, I think, for him, and a little bit shocking, I think, for him. But I had to just step out and be bold.
Wow.
And say, let me tell you the reason behind that, so that will help maybe get you into this different thought process.
That's beautiful. And I'm so glad you shared that. I have questions for you. Now, I'm sure you were a bit fearful before speaking up. How did you feel afterwards?
I felt I was proud of myself.
Yeah.
But I was still a little bit, to be truthful, worried about how it was going to impact me in the future.
Sure.
You know, because I didn't know how this person was going to take that and what that might look like later, not only for me, but for other people of color who came in and who may exhibit those same kind of demeanors.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate your approach in that example because you used historical perspective to help bring about understanding. Was the gentleman who spoke against the applicant, was he open to that? And then
he appeared to be. I think it was not immediate acceptance.
Okay.
And my goal was I really didn't expect him to say, oh, well, you know, whatever. I wanted to just put it on his mind, you know, so that he can, you know, flesh it out a little bit and see, when have I done this or said this or thought this before? Maybe there's something here that I didn't know, and I may be reacting on his own historical perspective.
Oh, Cindy says you planted a seed, Mary. I like that, Cindy, because sometimes that's all we can do. You know, we may feel the impetus to speak up in that moment and be bold enough to share. And we may have to be okay walking away, just knowing that we planted a seed and that, you know, God says, you know, someone plants, someone waters, but it's God who gives the increase. You know, maybe that opens someone's heart and, you know, 5 days, 5 years down the road, there's change. I like the way you say that. Thank you both for sharing. I'm setting my alarm to keep us moving. On page 13, we're still at the front of the book. She says, the same hammer will not tear down all of the walls that need to be torn down. Right? In some cases, it may be historical perspective. In some cases, it may be given a sense of comfort and love and reaching agreement in that moment that there's partnership and relationship. Then she goes on to say, you know, what keeps a poor child in Appalachia poor is not what keeps a poor child in Chicago poor, or what keeps a Black able-bodied woman poor is not what keeps a disabled man poor, even if the outcomes look the same. And so in a lot of cases, you know, I think we need to, everything is relative, but we need to consider all of the angles when we are talking about race and money and the impact of it all on people. She identifies this thought that there are those, you know, who just want more. And, you know, their thinking is, as I get more, eventually everybody else will get some, but not that they ever get as much as I get, because at the end of the day, I really want as much as I can have so that I can have the greatest amount of power and everyone else has the least amount of power. But then she goes on to identify in this first chapter some basic rules about race. Is there someone who would read these 3 basic rules about race?
Basic rules about race. It is about race if a person, number 1, it is about race if a person of color thinks it is about race. Number 2, it is about race if it disproportionately or differently affects people of color. Number 3, it is about race if it fits into a broader pattern of events that disproportionately or differently affect people of color.
Thank you, Stephanie. You know, and at first I thought, why did she put this in here? But then I thought, you know, there are often so many times when I've heard the comment, not everything is about race. Or, you know, why are they always screaming about race? And if you look at these basic rules, if Tanya, as an African-American female, feels that it's about race, then for me, it is about race. If the situation disproportionately affects an entire group, it is about race. If it fits into a broader pattern, when I look in certain communities right around Clark Atlanta University, there is so much need. That's definitely about race. And so for me, everything about their life and their existence in that 30314 zip code, and myself included, because that is where I serve, everything is about race until everything in that community changes. But what is racism? We say everything is about race, but then we also talk about racism. But do we even have a common working definition of racism? In the book, she says one of the most telling signs that we have problems about race in America is the fact that we can't even agree on what the definition actually is. So she raises two. The first one, racism is any prejudice against someone because of their race. The second common definition, racism is any prejudice against someone because of their race when those views are reinforced by systems of power. She goes on to identify the second definition as her preference, and she explains why. Would someone like to read these three sections?
When we use the first definition of racism, we inaccurately reduce issues of race in America to a battle for the hearts and minds of individual races. Instead of seeing racist behaviors, and racial oppression as a part of a larger system. You don't even have to be a racist to be a part of a racist system. The impotent race hatred of the violent racists was built and nurtured by a system that has much more insidiously woven a quieter yet no less violent version of the same oppressive beliefs into the fabric of our society.
Thank you, Connie. Let's focus in on this middle sentence for a second. You don't even have to be a racist to be a part of a racist system. There are so many who would say, I'm not racist, but would also not be willing to raise a hand, to speak up, to speak out, or to take action in a system that is completely racist. And let's be very clear, the systems that we have, governmental, education, every environmental, are set up to benefit some and to be of detriment to others. If you think about Cop City in Atlanta, there's so much going on right now. You know, there are protesters who are pushing back on the building of Cop City. Well, what is Cop City and why is it even such a thing? After the protests in 2020, after George Floyd's murder, and the pushback on police, we need reform, police need to be trained. The city of Atlanta heard that. And so they thought, okay, we are going to develop a Cop City where individuals, you were just thinking, awesome, Cindy. Individuals could go in and train to be able to handle different situations, whether it's a school or a hospital, and so all of those things would be in this Cop City. But where is Cop City located? Right? It's not in northern Fulton County. It's in DeKalb County, in the middle of a community where Black and brown people majority live. And so there's so many, it's a forest. So there are those who don't want the land interrupted, but there are also those who do not want it in the environment that it is being created in. And then there are others who don't believe that it's necessary. So there's pushback for a lot of reasons. But again, the systems that we are talking about are coming into play in all of these different areas. Any thoughts as we move forward? Keep going. Okay. Chapter 3. I'm just going to try to keep us moving because we're almost short on time, but this is such a good conversation. What if I talk about race wrong? Not all of us are lucky enough to be in an office or to have conversation, you know what, where we can talk about race and everybody's good. Most of us do not have that opportunity. In fact, for the majority of us, it's the opposite. The conversations are tough, she says, but necessary. Then she says this amazing thing right here: you are going to screw it up. And so rather than not having the conversation, going into it with certain tips, as well as knowing that you might screw it up, is a great place to start. And so she offers these tips for conversational success. Is there someone who would like to read the 9 tips?
Joan, number 1 is state your intentions.
Yeah.
Number 2, remember what your priority in the conversation is. And don't let your emotions override that. Do your research. Don't make your anti-racism argument oppressive against other groups. When you start to feel defensive, stop and ask yourself why. Do not tone the police. If you are white, watch how many times you say I or me. Ask yourself, am I trying to be right or am I trying to be better? Do not force people of color into discussions of race.
Thank you, Joan. There's a lot of wisdom in these 9 conversational tips. And I don't think I have the page included. It might be on the next page. And so I invite you to bookmark this page. Number 8 is the best. Absolutely. Are you trying to be right or are you trying to be better? Absolutely. Starts on page 45. Thank you so much. So many times we enter into conversation and rather than listening to the person, we are thinking about what our response is going to be even before they finish what they're going to say. And so here, are we listening? Are we thinking more about trying to be right and defend ourselves? Or are we just trying to be better and to hear and to listen and to understand? Any thoughts here? Again, these are 9 great tips. And so thank you. It starts on page 45. Something to refer to again as we move forward and we continue to have these conversations.
So Dr. Miles,
Yes.
I think another question that we might put in there or might think about is that if someone is trying to have that conversation about race and say something that kind of rubs you the wrong way or maybe offends you, I think a good way to kind of de-escalate that is say, tell me why you feel that way. Why do you think that? And that seems to me, it works for me, and I think it kind of lets people know, it gives them impression that you want to understand and that you're not trying to be right or trying to say they're wrong.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. It acknowledges their humanness in the moment and their feelings. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's something in the chat. Let's see here. The screen says starts on 49. Okay. I may have that wrong. Thank you. So it is page 45. It starts on 45. So then she goes on, when you have these conversations, they're not right. We're going to screw it up. And sometimes the toothpaste gets out the tube and there's no putting that toothpaste back in. And so then she offers some tips for when it goes very wrong. Is there someone who would like to read those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tips for when things go wrong? That's great. Oh, wait, that's great, Mary. It's so hard to not have a conversation just shut down, even from one white person to another about race. Thank you for that, Kelly. Okay, a reader.
This is Elnetta.
Elnetta.
Stop trying to jump back in when a conversation is beyond saving. Number 2, apologize. Number 3, don't write your synopsis of the conversation as the time you got yelled at. Number 4, don't insist that people give you credit for your intentions. And number 5, don't beat yourself up.
Thank you for that. I think these are so very important. You know, you engaged in the conversation and you may have flubbed something. What you intended to say may not have been what somebody else heard. And so how do you then reclaim the conversation? Does that person walk away or are they still there? If they're still there, apologize. If they walked away, find another time later. But again, I think great tips to kind of think about things when they go wrong, and then don't beat yourself up about it, because again, you started the conversation, and as someone said earlier, you planted a seed. Chapter 4, why am I always being told to check my privilege? And she goes on in this chapter to say, privilege is not good-ish. You should feel bad about having so that other people can feel good about not having it. But that's not to say that you won't feel bad about your privilege. Rather, privilege in the social justice context is an advantage or a set of advantages that you have that others do not have. And so in this picture, you'll see Roger, right, starts with a 50-foot advantage, and Marissa is at a lower point, has to work harder, and even in working harder to be twice as good, only to try to be even with, she's still at a disadvantage. And so just by nature of, he quote unquote wins. And that can be applied in so many situations. She also gives examples where you can identify places to use your privilege. There's so many photos that I wanted to choose for this one, but I found this one. There's 2 ladders. Now, while the ladders may seem equal, and let's say in education, right? You're going to school in Fulton, APS, just like you are in North Fulton, but the education is very different from one zip code to another. And so on the right, you may or may not have books or computers in the classroom, as opposed to another school where it's completely different. And so where there is privilege, how do you then help in an environment that starts with less, and there's no way to even climb up to that? Yep, I can totally relate to Marissa. Yeah, wow. Absolutely. As people of color, we are always told, you know, we have to be twice as good in order to hopefully even try to find our way somewhere near other people. And so we live our lives that way. But for many of us, the starting point requires us to jump or to even to get to where we need to. And so how do we use our privilege in different situations? So she talks about intersectionality. And this is a phrase that was coined, or a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. But it basically talks about all of the different ways, right, of intersect. And at the very center is power. And you'll see on this wheel, everything from citizenship to skin color, the type of education, your ability, sexuality, mental health, body size, housing, wealth, language, gender, and all of the different nuances within each of those categories that then identify and intersect into power and privilege. She says that intersectionality, some people push back on it because, you know what, I don't want to talk about intersectionality because golly, I mean, how many different ways are we going to try to break this thing down to help everybody be a part of the conversation? But until we break it down, there are always going to be those who are marginalized, right? My body type is very different from yours. And so I may be perceived one way or the other because my hips or my butt or whatever is larger than someone else, or my lips, or however you want to My education may be different. And so I may speak in a way that does not sound as acceptable as someone who had a much better education along the way. Or gender. My goodness, how many different ways can we break that down? And so intersectionality, she says, forces people to interact with, listen to, and consider people they do not usually interact with and listen to. This chapter is police brutality about race. I just wanted to include some pictures here. Up in the top left corner, that's a schematic for Cop City. In the bottom left corner are the 4 officers who were involved in the murder of George Floyd. In the center, you'll see, in police terror, but police reform now. We want police reform, but Cop City, is it or is it not the answer? Black lives matter, but how often have you heard someone say, yeah, but all lives matter? And then does that negate or minimize the struggle of those people of color who are Black, who have struggles, who are killed in a higher ratio than any other ethnic group? And then on the right, you'll see I included the officers from Memphis. You'll see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of 5 gentlemen who were arrested, but you'll also see up in this top corner, the Caucasian gentleman who was also arrested. And I'll share that I tried so hard to find a picture of his arrest, but the only thing that I could find on the white gentleman is his commendation. And he was one of the first people, who ran behind Tyree Nichols and said that he hoped that he got stomped out. But there is no picture of his arrest anywhere. Is police brutality really about race? What do you all think in the chat? This chapter disturbed, horrified me as I read the history of law enforcement in this country. Yep. It's like a moving sidewalk at the airport. We all get on at different points. There's the point you get on. Absolutely. Any thoughts? Yes, there's a chat. There's some comments here. Absolutely. Yes, it's about hatred, not just race. Wow, that's powerful. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's powerful, Linda. Absolutely. You get a lot of agreement on that. And this is something, when we talk about our young people, historically, when young people, I'd say early 1900s, young people, 12 years old, they were working, right? They were apprentices, they were being mentored by other people. And then as the Industrial Revolution came along, there weren't as many jobs. And so the parents, of course, had to work to take care of the children and the family. And so the young people who were at one point working alongside their parents and being mentored and developing skills were moved out of the workforce. And so they had all of these young people who were just like sitting around. What do we do with all these? So they started coming up with rules. YMCA, Monopoly, and a lot of games came about at that time. But it was the policing of a lot of individuals that became heavier at that time at a younger age. Oftentimes in our policing in communities of color, there are those who come in with a mentality of superiority and a mentality that the only way to control those in the community is to be very forceful. And on top of that is the feeling about people of color, which does include hatred. And so rather than getting to know the people in the community, those communities of color are viewed as inferior and animalistic. And it just creates, wow, there's a lot of comments. Okay, in the chat. Wow, about the picture. Yes, it is about race. Agree, Linda. Yes, yes. It's about a particular culture. I still think a lot of it has to do with ingrained training. Hatred and fear and race all play into that. It's also about respect, absolutely, and the lack of respect. Thank you, Sylvia, for that. It can be about race, but includes lack of better training to see others as human beings. Absolutely, all of that, all of that. And if you think about our society in general, how many of us see one another as human beings? How many of us are willing to stop, to engage, to even make eye contact, to listen, to think of the other? Coming out of the pandemic, I know things were challenging going before the pandemic, but coming out, I feel that we are even less willing to see the humanity in one another. Yes, it should not be a question. Absolutely, absolutely. Y'all are amazing. The one thing that I would love is if we were having this conversation in person. We would certainly need more than 2 hours, because I know that in a lot of ways, the comments that you're sharing, if we were in dialogue in the same room, would be so powerful. So let's just keep going. In the covenant, one of the things that was mentioned was unfinished business, discomfort, and joy. We will not finish this book today, and certainly not this conversation. And so let us continue to move forward, and let's see how far we get. But thank you all for the ways that you were sharing. School to Pipeline, she lists some of the systemic contributors, as well as some ways to address this on pages 129 through 132. I didn't list all of them, but I know that you all have done a lot of work in this area. It's interesting to me how much of a struggle that there is. The United Way has something called the Child Wellbeing Index, and it measures by zip code the likelihood of a child to move from the economic bracket that they're in to a higher level. And so the thinking is, if you are in a community where most things are at a negative or struggle, you have very little chance of doing any better than the current situation that you're in. And so many of our students come to school. There's a chapter about why our students are so angry. There's a chapter that talks about that. And you come to school and you know things are not going to change. You are automatically upset with the world because you know that things are not set up fairly. And so what hope do you have for life? In our community, we call it trap. And the trap actually created a whole type of rap music called trap music. And it talks about the trap that so many people in certain communities find themselves in that they'll never get out of. And so within that, in that mind frame, you live your life knowing that you are trapped and nothing is ever going to get better. And so imagine how bleak and how it is the exception of the individuals who actually overcome such a way of thinking. But the majority end up here with the school to prison pipeline. Why can't I say the N-word? Simply because you just can't. In the book, she actually goes in to talk about that a bit, but it's a derogatory term. And even if I chose to use that word for the entire 2 hours we were here today, I certainly would not want to hear it from somebody else. It's hurtful. And when I hear it from someone who does not look like me, Addie has her hand raised, absolutely. It triggers me. Did you see the NPR special on the history of hip hop? No, I didn't.
I hope it ain't nothing important you need to know. No, it was just.
I will certainly look for it. For over 20 years, I have driven through what most have described as a hood. Yep. I make it a point to wait and to smile. It has made absolutely, and I'm sure for someone else as well. Let's see, go back to share. Go back to share. Oh yes, go back to share. Addie, is there something that you'd like to share?
Yes, thank you, Tanya. You know, I have in recent years found myself in interracial families. And wow, what a difference it can make. Because over dinner or riding in a car or just going to a game or something together, you find yourself with
My
such
facial ID don't work no more too good. I had to put in the code every time.
Let me see if I can find.
with you find yourself with so many different perspectives. You cannot run, you cannot hide. You're a family, you're different races, sometimes different levels. And I have learned and grown. I don't always agree with what I hear, but I think that someone said something about planting a seed. Sometimes you can plant a seed where you can say to someone, well, that was not a funny joke. Why was that funny? Why didn't someone say, let's not entertain that? But I don't know, one day as we continue to work together, live together, interact in United Women in Faith and wherever, I just think that we're going to all grow in this area. We cannot run from it. And then when you get a little baby that's a y'all, us, both sides, then your perspective is going to change.
Yeah.
And you're going to be more open to sharing rather than running.
Beautifully said, Addie. You know, and I like the example of, you know, the baby that that can bring people together out of love, right? It's that love, that union that brings together something that causes difference. That's a beautiful way to think about that. Thank you, Addie. This is such a great conversation, y'all. I did see, yes, I will share. There are a few places where I have typos, and so I will go back and correct that, but I'm happy to share the slides. I'm just gonna go through these next few slides very quickly. We have about 5 minutes. Cultural appropriation. I think this first picture up here says it. My culture is not a costume, right? And you see a lot of this on Halloween where someone has offended somebody because they've chosen either blackface or, you know, a prison uniform or whatever, Indian, Native American attire, a geisha girl, how offensive. And it is what it is. And it's where someone else tries to take ownership of someone else's culture. This is really important, microaggressions. And they're called micro because they're small, but they accumulate over time. I cited the pages where she talks about this. She gives examples, strategies when you feel like you've been perpetrated against, but also tips for those who have stated these microaggressions. And some of them are on here. Dismissing someone's opinion or perspective. Interrupting an individual when they're speaking, being mansplained. I think we all get that one. Not giving eye contact when an individual is speaking. And there's so many different, or you speak so well, you're not like the rest of them. Where are you from? Like all of those things are microaggressions because there's something underneath all of it. Share the slides on the screen. Are you all able to see my slides? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Why are our students so angry? I said this for later conversation because I would love for some of the students from CAU to engage in this conversation and to maybe have this conversation down the road. But I will say this, since the pandemic, in a lot of ways, our educational system struggled prior to, but once we, March 2020, moved everybody to Zoom, so many of our students checked out and have been anxious and are not up to par and where they should be since then. And so in a lot of ways, our students struggle, and there has not been enough resource. And this is something that we might want to think about for our students to process, or for all of us to process. How many of us have stopped to process the trauma that we went through during the pandemic? And I say that blanketly. Some of us experience trauma at different levels. And so how many of us have processed that? And if in your congregation, for you and others, that answer is no, that might be a ministry that needs to be offered. The model minority myth. 1966, William Peterson profiled the socioeconomic success of Japanese Americans, those who were interred. And so the myth has continued and has become a collection of stereotypes about Asian Americans, presenting them as the ideal minority group. But what has happened, and you all have seen, is the amount of hate and violence against Asian Americans, especially Asian American women, simply because of a phrase or a stereotype that has been placed upon them. And I included this picture in tears because how so very hurtful and how scary it is to live in an environment that way. As sisters who are doing our best to live in grace and show grace to others, we must remember to check our own, powerfully said, Jessica, our own microaggressions. Absolutely. I just called you a racist. What do I do now? She offers suggestions, page 220 to 223. I invite you to take a look at those. One of the other things that I love in her intro to the book is how she acknowledges that she wished that she had spent so much more time engaging with Indigenous Americans, engaging with those whose voices should have been a larger part of this conversation. And I think that's something that we do every day. You know, a lot of times we talk black, white, but when we think about color, it runs the gamut. When we think about race, ethnicity, it runs the gamut. And until we're all at the table will not be complete. Racism stops with you and me, and I do encourage you all to continue this conversation, and I'm so grateful that you all invited me to be a part of this today. Do I hand it back to Jessica or to Stephanie?
I think to Stephanie at this point. Yeah. But thank you so much.
Yes, Tanya, thank you so much. I know we weren't able to get through every piece of this book. It is a treasure trove. And I had the opportunity to sit with our SEJ team and go through this. And Tanya, your take and your perspective on this has been amazing. I almost wish I had done this with you first. But we just thank you and appreciate you so much. And thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us.
Thank you, and I love you all.
Oh, we love you. Thank you. So for those who might be wanting a little bit more, our social action coordinator, Cindy Hall, has something she would like to say.
Yes, we will continue to celebrate our Charter for Racial Justice next month with our Spiritual Growth Social Action event at beautiful Camp Glisson. A weekend of prayer, music, soul care, justice principles, and fun, April 28th and 29th. The weekend is going to start with dinner together in the dining hall Friday evening, followed by worship and music, a service led by Dr. Kay Hagen, Director of Lay Servant Ministries, the Northeast District. After the service, there will be several interesting workshops to choose from. There will be something that everyone will like, all varied. After breakfast on Saturday morning, Reverend Brian Tillman, North Georgia Conference Director of Inclusion and Advocacy, will lead us in a thoughtful and prayerful session on social and racial justice. Reverend Tillman will be assisted in Holy Communion by Reverend Soon Nix of the Korean Church of Atlanta, UMC. And after communion, we'll wrap up the day with lunch. This is a great opportunity for a women's retreat already planned out for you and a spiritual renewal weekend. So I hope you'll come and bring a group from your church.
Thank you, Cindy. I hope we hope to have that flyer out early next week. So we hope that you will consider attending and continuing some of this conversation. So as soon as I can get my share screened, Isabel De Sousa will give us our benediction. Here we go. Can everyone see that?
And now, may the Lord torment you. May the Lord keep before you the faces of the hungry, the lonely, the rejected, and the despised. May the Lord afflict you with pain for the heart, for the wounded, for the oppressed, the abused, the victims of violence. May God grace you with agony, a burning thirst for justice and righteousness. May the Lord give you courage and strength and compassion to make ours a better world, to make your community a better community, to make your church a better church. And may you do your best to make it so. And after you have done your best, may the Lord grant you peace. Amén. In Spanish. Y ahora, que el Señor te atormente, que el Señor guarde ante vosotros el rostro de los hambrientos, los solitarios, los rechazados y los despreciados. Que el Señor os aflija con dolor, o los heridos, los oprimidos, los abusados, las víctimas de la violencia. Que Dios bendiga con agonía una sed ardiente de justicia y rectitud. Que el Señor les dé coraje y fortaleza y compasión para hacer de nuestro un mundo mejor, para hacer de su comunidad una mejor comunidad, para hacer de su iglesia una mejor iglesia, y que hagáis lo mejor que podáis para que así sea, y después de haberlo hecho, que el Señor os conceda la paz. Amén.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again for joining us this morning. We're actually going to get you out of here a little bit early. The plan is to post this recording on our North Georgia Conference website and to get an updated slide deck from Tanya and make that available to everyone. I saw someone's hand raised. Sylvia?
Yes, that was me. Very quickly before we leave, our social action day this year that I am preparing is about racial justice. And I would like to know to put out there so that everyone would be aware of, are there any medical conditions that are specific to the Blacks?
What?
Well,
I think that if you're doing a registration, I think that it might be pertinent to put on the registration any dietary or medical concerns that individuals might have.
No, that's not quite what I was thinking. Someone had mentioned things like not stillborns, infant mortality. What was another one? High blood pressure. Things that are typical to sickle cell anemia. Yes, diabetes, heart disease. I just want to put it out there to everyone that, you know, there are conditions that are typical for the Blacks, not so much for the whites, but for Blacks, and they need to be addressed, especially in the medical field.
Do you have Black women that are part of your planning? If so, I would certainly include them in your planning. And, you know, yes, and I agree, try to be inclusive of, you know, those diseases that affects, you know, everyone. But yes, please include your, the Black women that's in your unit or district in your planning.
They can give you some guidance. And I apologize, I thought you were talking about like other situations. So
no, that's okay. That's quite all right. I appreciate all the input, and what a lovely program you've put out today.
Thank you. We're so glad that you were able to join us. And before we dismiss, again, I want to thank you for joining us, and please don't forget to spring forward.
Stephanie, stop
Have
sharing.
a wonderful.
Stop sharing and just so we can say goodbye.
Okay, I agree. Hang on one second.
Okay.
All right. I see everybody now. Thank you all again. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody. Take care.